Before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about why we have these public board meetings. We really see these meetings as a key way to bring together our community, job seekers, funders, community partners, alumni, staff, to really share information on our work and the exciting work that we have going forward as well. Today's session, I'm very excited about, as we'll be able to talk more about the vital role of immigrants and refugees in revitalizing communities, especially in this election year. Today, we're probably best known for our work with immigrant and refugee professionals through the support of our amazing coaches and the coaching model that we've developed with a proven track record of success in connecting talent to employers. Today, we wanted to highlight the work that we're doing to expand our impact through our delivery partners, local organizations in cities and towns across America that are working to revitalize their communities. I'm excited for us to help shine a spotlight on the great work of these organizations and how Upwardly Global is working with these partners to support their efforts and contribute to the narrative on the important role immigrants and refugees have in contributing to the success of their local communities and to the US more broadly. To start the conversation, I'm pleased to introduce Jeremy Robbins from the American Immigration Council. The AIC and UpGlow have partnered for many years, and it's really a great pleasure, Jeremy, to have you here with us today. For those of you who may not be familiar with the AIC, they are a leading voice on how America thinks and acts towards immigrants and immigration, and work towards a more fair and just immigration system that opens doors to those who need protection and really unleashes the energy and skills that immigrants can bring. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on how the AIC are supporting the conversation and how immigrants and refugees are revitalizing our communities. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you all for having me. We are as Tammy mentioned, a very long-term partner and supporter of UpGlow, and I cannot endorse enough the efforts of the entire UpGlow staff on behalf of immigrants and refugees. So, as Tammy mentioned, my name is Jeremy Robbins. I am the executive director of the American Immigration Council, and the council was founded in 1987 by all of the immigration lawyers in the country, who sort of recognized that, hey, we are, as immigration lawyers, we are the experts. We understand what's wrong with our system. We understand how to fix it. And importantly, we're located in every single community in the country. So we understand what's actually happening in our communities, which is the conversation that we're gonna have today. And how do we leverage that? How do we leverage that for change that really supports immigrants and that makes our community stronger? And they founded the American Immigration Council in 1987 to be this hub of policy and research and advocacy and litigation, to do two things, really, to really support immigrants and refugees and fix the system to make it better for them, but also to make America stronger. Because immigration isn't just about immigrants, it's about the country as a whole. And 2 years ago, we did something that doesn't happen a lot in the nonprofit world, but probably should happen more, is that recognizing the scale of the problem we want to solve. We merged with a group called New American Economy, which also was a long-term partner of UpGlow. And New American Economy was founded by Mike Bloomberg when he was mayor of New York City, to take the story of how immigrants are revitalizing New York and strengthening New York, and help other communities understand that, lean into that, and make immigration part of their economic strategy. And it had been built out to more than 100 communities across the country, where, working with mayors and business leaders, we developed plans on how you're going to receive and bring immigrants into the community, make sure immigrants succeed. Because immigration isn't just about who gets to our shores, right? It's about what happens after you get here. And that requires real investments in helping immigrants and refugees succeed. So at the council, along with our national work to shape immigration policy, to sue the government to protect the rights of immigrants and refugees, to educate the public and the media about immigration, we also work directly in more than 100 communities, hand in hand with mayors, with chambers of commerce, with nonprofits, with other national groups like UpGlow, and with people like Steve Tabachman, who's here today, who's been a fabulous partner for years and years and years, to craft these plans that are going to help immigrants learn English, find a job, obtain legal status, participate in civil society, and succeed. And our goals are to support both migrants, as I said, and the receiving communities, because we want to build cohesive, resilient, dynamic societies where everyone really feels like they belong. Um, and so migration is one of those weird things where it's very much a win-win. It is a huge economic boon for immigrants and refugees, right? Who can come here and can often more than 10x their income, right? Just by moving from one country to another, all of a sudden your worldview, how much you can earn. But it's also a huge economic boon for communities that people settle in. And so we have the virtue of having a think tank, so we do a lot of research on this. And so there's some data, and I'll share some of it, but I would commend you. I'll give you mostly national data when I share it, but if you go on your device to maptheimpact.org, maptheimpact.org, you can look in every county, in every major city, in every state, in every congressional district. We have similar data on the role immigrants are playing in every community. So there are a bunch of ways that immigrants revitalize communities. Um, One is that they revitalize neighborhoods. Well, immigrants tend and refugees tend to move to neighborhoods when you come often you do not have a huge amount of economic opportunity, right? You come and you have to go where you can. And what that means in practice is that you often see immigrants and refugees moving into underserved neighborhoods and revitalizing those neighborhoods. You see neighborhoods that where all of a sudden there are fewer empty storefronts and houses, where there are more grocery stores, there are more Main Street businesses, where crime decreases because there's more activity on the street. And you see that in some cities like Utica, which is now about a quarter foreign born. There's a huge Bosnian population and many others that have moved in. You see it in cities all over the country. Um, and when you look at immigrants are now approaching 14% of the population, but more than 22% of all businesses in this country are owned by immigrants. And when you look at mainstream businesses, that number goes higher and higher because people are coming here. And there's a nice story, right? Like people are very entrepreneurial. The act of moving across the world is an entrepreneurial act. It takes a risk taker. And then there's the less positive story of when you come to a place where you don't speak the language, you don't have the social networks, your opportunity to go into traditional work channels is just harder. And that's why more immigrants start businesses. And that's why you need groups like Upwardly Global that are helping people build those channels that wouldn't exist otherwise. Um, the other thing happens when immigrants and refugees move into a community is they start spending, right? So nationally, immigrants have more than $1.4 trillion a year in spending power, and pay more than $500 billion a year in taxes, locally, federally, and states. Um, Within the economies they're moving into, they're filling key gaps. So one is just workers, right? I mean, we talk about baby boomers with 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. That is going to have a profound effect. We have two things that are happening, or I'll say three things that are happening. One is we're living longer. The second is we're having more health problems. And the third is we're having fewer children. And those together create really profound challenges for our economy and our society over the coming generation. If you saw the Congressional Budget Office and the Fed just put out numbers about trying to explain why the economy is so much stronger than we thought it was going to be, right? That all the projections that they've been making they're now revising upwards. Immigration is a substantial part of that story because there were actually more immigrants that came than they had expected. And what that ended up doing, because immigrants are way more likely to be of working age. So if you look nationally at sort of prime working age people between the ages of 16 and 64, for Americans, about 61% of the population is in that working age period. For immigrants, it's 78% of the population. People are coming here to work. And as people are retiring, immigrants are helping them out. It's not a panacea. It's not going to fill everything, but they're helping backfill those jobs. They're helping pay into Social Security. They're helping pay into Medicare. They're helping buy homes. One of the interesting things, most Americans have their wealth tied up in their homes. That's the primary driver of wealth in America. Until you're about 65, you are more likely to be a home buyer. At 65, you become more likely to be a home seller. When you have a huge cohort of baby boomers moving into that category, all of a sudden that has huge downward pressure on home values. Well, immigration is a huge upward pressure. So immigrants have trillions of dollars of home wealth. They help support and raise the value of every American's home. Also within the economy, the jobs that they fill. So immigrants are much more likely to lack a high school diploma. They're also much more likely to have a graduate degree. They tend to in contrast to the Americans, they have a very different economic skill set. And when you add those two together, you tend to have an economy that is more resilient and more dynamic. And you see it within industries where if you're in the construction industry, there are often huge shortages among roofers. If you can fill those roofing jobs, there are a lot of other good construction jobs that come with it. You look in tech, where there are thousands, literally thousands of unfilled jobs at every tech company. If you can fill those, they're jobs and support jobs that go around them. Immigrants are also more likely to move for a job. They're more likely to work nights and weekends. They're more likely to be essential workers. You think during the pandemic about how many, and this is another fabulous up close story, about how many healthcare trained professionals came to the United States from other parts of the country, and when the pandemic hit, weren't able to practice their profession. We needed doctors, we needed nurses, we needed people on the front line, but we weren't able to get people skilled. And think about how many lives are saved by groups like Upglow that are helping people get there and help, and how much the economy and really our health and our society is increased from that. And that's only going to increase. You think about the role immigrants play in the care economy. When again, 36.5% of all home health aides in this country are immigrants, almost 30% of doctors, 32% of all psychiatrists. You think about adult care centers right now, increasingly those of us who have aging parents and are starting to think about who's going to care for our seniors. These are huge and growing needs where immigration is a key driver of meeting them. So that's the positive. But immigration isn't all unicorn and rainbows, right? It doesn't come without real challenges. And you're seeing that right now. You're seeing the current migration flows, particularly on the southern border and what's coming into cities, that there's a real challenge. Like if I'm calling in from New York City long term is going to be hugely positively impacted by all of the people that are coming to New York City now. But that doesn't change the fact that it is an unbelievable challenge for New York City to support so many people coming quickly many without the ability to work, and without enough federal help or coordination. And so what New York needs more than anything else is it needs local partnerships. And this is true in Denver, it's true in cities all over the country. We need local partnerships where it's the government, where it's local nonprofits, where it's groups working together to make sure that people can find housing, practice their profession, learn English, and really reap the benefits that immigration can bring. Because too often we really do think of this as like, oh, well, it's just who gets to come here and who doesn't. But that's not what immigration is about. And if you are going to make immigration the success it can be, both for immigrants and for the community as a whole, it takes a lot of work. And so that's why I'm thrilled to be here with this wonderful panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Avi and to the panel to talk through what is going on the ground, what can people do, and the role everyone can play. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you all, and appreciate everything that folks on this call are doing.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for those remarks and that framing. So informative, and I think sets the stage so well for the next part of our meeting, which is our panel discussion. As Jeremy mentioned, my name is Avi Ziv. I'm the Vice President of Programs at Upwardly Global, and I'm so pleased to be joined by our panel guests, Steve Tabachman, the Executive Director for Global Detroit, and Zachary Osolo, the Assistant Manager and Office of New Americans Job Coach at Interfaith Works of Central New York. Upwardly Global is so lucky to partner with both of these organizations, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Zachary and Steve on their insights and experiences and how immigrants and refugees have played a role in revitalizing the communities and regions where they work. We will have a chance to take questions from the audience towards the end of the panel, so as Tammy mentioned, please do put any questions you might have for Zachary or Steve into the Q&A function, and we'll make sure to ask those towards the end. And with that, I want to turn to you, Steve, first. Can you tell us a little bit about Global Detroit, and as the Executive Director of Global Detroit, how you all think about this topic of immigration and revitalization and economic development in the communities of Michigan?
Sure. Thanks, Avi. And I really want to thank you and Gina and everybody at Upwardly Global for your partnership over this past year and really almost 15 years. And appreciate seeing my friend Jeremy Robbins, and really honored to be here speaking to at your national board meeting. So how do we think about this from an economic development standpoint? Global Detroit is an economic development organization. And we were created at the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce with support from the New Economy Initiative 15 years ago. And we believe that the intentional inclusion of immigrants and refugees in our community and economic development strategies will lead to economic growth, economic prosperity, not just for the immigrants and refugees coming to our communities, but really for everyone in Detroit, Southeast Michigan, Michigan, and the country. We run programs around talent and entrepreneurship, neighborhood revitalization. We do a lot of research, communications, advocacy, and policy work. And we work with not just folks here in Michigan and Southeast Michigan, but frankly, all across the country. We've been for now more than a decade, we've been the partner with Welcoming America for their Welcoming Economies work. And we're expanding our national presence through a new initiative that hopefully in the coming weeks and months, you all hear more about. We're calling it ePluribus, but its focus will be to support local immigrant economic inclusive development initiatives all across the country, which we've been doing for 10 years, as I mentioned, both with individually through direct consulting contracts with Welcome America, et cetera. I just want to build on what Jeremy mentioned briefly in his remarks, that this country's demographics, we're facing slow population growth, rapidly aging, and a shrinkage of our workforce, and particularly among a number of people going to college and coming out of high school. And immigration plays a vital role. He mentioned the federal budget studies that suggest that $7 trillion in the U.S. economy being added through immigration. And we work very closely, and in fact, our work with Upwardly Global in this past 2 years is fueled by a statewide business Michigan Global Talent Coalition that we built that includes about 25 local and state chambers of commerce, economic development organizations, industry groups, all the way from Invest Upper Peninsula or Invest UP in some rural areas of Michigan to Southwest Michigan First, the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Detroit Chamber, Mich Auto, our Auto Industry Association, the Small Business Association of Michigan. These are Republicans and Democrats, business leaders, industry experts who have come together and done exactly, looked at the data that Jeremy suggested, and come to the conclusion that Michigan is far better off by recruiting immigrants, by welcoming immigrants, and by looking very specifically at the needs of immigrants and how they best connect with the economy. So skilled immigrant integration, that Upwardly Global is the national leader in software services and support on the ground for job seekers who have college degrees, who come, who are foreign trained and educated, is one of those areas where almost everywhere in the country could do a better job at leveraging that talent. And so what does that mean? For us, and what I want to tell the folks on this call is that now is our time. This is our moment. This is the time to move out from the shadows and really blow our trumpet about the calling for America to welcome its immigrants and to invest in those intentional strategies to include immigrants and refugees into our economy. What that has meant in Michigan is that in the last 2 budget cycles, the state legislature, starting with a Republican-dominated legislature in both the Senate and the House, has invested $5 million of its annual budget, general funds, into skilled immigrant integration programs. Our governor's top agenda, I'm sorry. Our governor's top agenda item is to upskill the Michigan workforce and to make sure that we're a state that has 60% of its workforce with a post-secondary degree or credential. And, to get there, we wrote with the business community, with the governor's office, a comprehensive inclusion plan for this, what we call 60 by 30, 60% of our workforce having a skilled or degree by 2030. I think we're the first state to do so. We're certainly the first state to fund it in a comprehensive way. There are 7 components of that. It includes things like investing in our community colleges to better serve immigrants and refugees. It includes international student retention, but it includes a massive investment of over $1 million a year into bringing Upwardly Global into the state, making it available all across the state, and partnering with our workforce development agencies. So in Michigan, we have a privatized workforce development system. It's called Michigan Works. They're independent nonprofits. And we have used funding to create job coaches at 5 separate agencies, from Grand Rapids to Lansing to Southeast Michigan, and to get scholarships for Upwardly Global's platform for those job seekers. I just want to give you some numbers on impact. We're literally 60 days, less than 60 days from our public launch. And I don't even know if our friends at Upwardly Global, I'm sure Avi knows this, but I'm not sure all the other folks, including the board, knows this, but we got 157 applications from eligible folks, meaning they had at least a 4-year degree, they're a new arrival, and they're unemployed or underemployed. Within really about 45 days, 44 of those applicants are up on the Upwardly Global platform. 14 have actually completed a course. 2 have actually completed all 5 core modules. And we're off to the races. And, it is our goal that each year we can serve as many as, 200 or more people. But it's not just the work that we've done through the 60 by 30 grant, which we call the Michigan Global Talent Initiative. We have been a partner with Upwardly Global and others so that this state received, Southeast Michigan, a federal EDA Build Back Better grant focused on the mobility sector. And again, helping skilled immigrants is a core part of the talent strategies that mainstream organizations, not immigrant rights organizations, of course they are supporting this. Of course, refugee resettlement is supporting this, but it's really refreshing to see, Mich Auto, our auto chamber, our regional chambers, our economic development organizations, our workforce agencies recognize that this is a priority economic development, workforce development strategy to invest in our immigrants. So that's how we're looking at this. In answer to your question, it's not just the programs that we run, it takes a village, and perhaps we'll get to some of that in the questions, but I want to be mindful of time.
Thank you so much, Steve, for starting us off. And now really is our time. And I loved hearing you say that. I want to turn to you, Zachary, and maybe a similar question. Would love for you to talk a little bit about Interfaith Works of Central New York and how you all have seen immigrants and refugees revitalizing Syracuse and the region.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I take this opportunity with a lot of humility because me, myself, I'm an immigrant, and I only see the intentionality of Upward Global in trying to enhance the capacity of immigrants and refugees so that they can also contribute to the well-being of the United States. So I'll talk a little bit about Interfaith Works. I work here as an assistant manager and also stroke job coach. So I'm in the implementation process of ensuring that the job seekers who are looking for a job, we are working together with them until we see success comes from it. So Interfaith Works was formed in 1976. And the aim of forming this organization was with the intention of building racial and religious equity and create bridges of understanding among different communities. We have 3 different programs under our organization. That is the Center of New Americans. So this program basically helps with the support of newly arrived refugees, parolees, and also immigrants. And we try to provide them with housing, culturally appropriate meals, medical and employment assistance, cultural orientation, education, enrollment, immigration assistance, mental health and wellness. And all of these services is with the intention of making them to become self-sufficient. We also have the Center of Al Hindi Center of Dialogue and Action. And this program focuses on promoting racial, religious, and social equality using dialogue. We do this in schools, colleges, corporations, workplaces, and community within the community and different institutions that once desire to use dialogue as a transformational means of bringing transformation in our communities. And then we also have the Center of Healthy Aging. And now with this, the focus is majorly with helping to promote activities such as socialization and lifelong learning for those who are aging in our midst, so that we allow them to age with dignity. So in the process of us, we've been involved in resettling refugees and also immigrants for almost 40 years. And so for me, when I think about revitalization, it's about the people and the ability to allow them to be the best that they can be. It has to deal with how we formulate policies and how those policies tend to also address the needs of our people who are living in our midst. Because, like, let's face it, people who have been resettled here as refugees, eventually they're going to be American citizens. So we have to be invested in their well-being. And so also revitalization, to me, is also rebirth of a community that is steered by the vision of ordinary people going to understand what is it that they desire to see in their lives, and also rebuilding them, or even rebuilding the community with pride and power, and also with the commitment. Sorry for that. Sorry, okay. And also we see that revitalization also, it's about sharing in the vision of making things better. So revitalization in itself, it's a powerful cause for everyone. And so everyone needs to be involved in trying to see what kind of contribution that they can bring to be able to change things and turn things from how they are to make them even better. It's a matter of remembering how things used to be and making it even better. So that is about revitalization within Syracuse, and we can see immigrants are really critical in balancing the equation of population within this region, the workforce, and also just to ensure that the economy revolves the way it's supposed to be. So a big portion of it is really, it's being played by the availability or even the presence of immigrants in our midst, immigrants and refugees in our midst. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zachary, for sharing all of the experiences you're having in the Syracuse and Central New York region, and the breadth of the work that Interfaith Works does for job seekers and clients and community there. Steve, I want to maybe turn back to you. And you mentioned in some of your opening remarks or responses around the state of Michigan and the role that they have been playing in some of these efforts. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that and what that has looked like, perhaps the role that Global Detroit or other community organizations or institutions have really played to move forward these efforts.
Sure. So we're the Global Detroit strategy debuted in 2010. It included 11 strategic initiatives, including a skilled immigrant integration platform. And we brought Upwardly Global to the state back then to do some early licensing guides. Fortunately for us, that report that we originally issued really helped, and ongoing communications and research and advocacy really helped to elevate this idea of including immigrants in our economic development plans, community development plans, both locally and across the state. So welcoming Michigan was one of those strategies, and we're proud to say that we have more welcoming cities, counties, and townships in the state of Michigan than any other state in America. And we have several local government offices of immigrant affairs, as well as a state office of New Americans. So about a little more than 10 years ago, what was originally the Michigan Office for New Americans, now called the Office of Global Michigan, was launched by a Republican governor, Governor Rick Snyder. And to be honest, we introduced them to Upwardly Global during those licensing guides that we were writing. And many of you know Mike Zimmer, who at the time was at the head of the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs department. This is the department that issues professional licensing. And he came up with state dollars to open an Upwardly Global office in Detroit, and Annie Fenton was hired to run that office. And then after a year, the partnership continued, but they liked the program so much they brought it in-house to the state. So for almost a decade. There was a program at the Office of Global Michigan known as the Michigan International Talent Solutions, or MITS. Annie Fenton was its director. At some point, it had as many as, I think, 3 job coaches. And when we wrote the 2000, so the governor came into office in January of 2019, announced her workforce development plan in her first State of the State address as her economic strategy, besides Fix the Damn Roads, which is her other platform initiative. Sorry, it's her language, not mine. And then we instantly went to work working with the Office of Global Michigan, the Office of the 60 by 30, and wrote this strategy. And it was our intention that we would expand the MITS program with funding under this initiative. It took us 4 years to get that funding. And when we did, Global Michigan had evolved the MITS program such that it wasn't doing direct service, and it was really just providing technical assistance and support to partners that were helping skilled immigrants. I don't even know if there were active folks who were partnering with Upperly Global in those gap years between what is now the new Skilled Immigrant Integration Program. But our grants run through the Office of Global Michigan. And as I said, we've gotten 2 $5 million grants. We're working on year 3 funding right now. In fact, this is the first year we've appeared in the governor's executive budget recommendations. Although for a slight cut, we'll be advocating to get that back to the full level. But we've worked with Office of Global Michigan every step of the way on this. I will add that obviously refugee resettlement agencies, adult education agencies are really important partners. In our state, the State Office of Refugee Resettlement is housed in our State Office of New Americans, or what is, as I said, called the Office of Global Michigan. And they've been very innovative, and they've funded now 5 regional refugee collaboratives. So these are collaboratives that include the local refugee resettlement agencies, but also workforce development agencies, social service, health care agencies, ethnic community-based organizations, school districts, local government. Global Detroit has the fortune of running the largest regional refugee resettlement collaborative in the state. So we cover the Southeast Michigan region, which is the Metro Detroit region. And that is an important source, as I said, Avi, earlier on, that this is more than, and Upperly Global works this way. It's more than just having access to the software. It's more than just having access to a job coach. It's working with the community to find people who are in need of skilled immigrant integration services. That is ethnic community organizations. Those can be faith-based, temples, mosques, churches. They can be ethnic community-based organizations, or it could just be the community at large. And so for us, we know traditionally the old state program, the MITS program, that those refugee resettlement agencies were a primary source, as well as adult education, of applicants. And so our state Office of New Americans plays a pivotal role in funding and coordinating local refugee collaboratives. And so to get the word out, that is an important partner of ours.
Thank you for laying all of that out for us, Stephen. It's incredible to see the support for immigrants and refugees in the state of Michigan. Zachary, I'd love to turn back to you, and particularly given your role as assistant manager and job coach at Interfaith Works, if you can maybe give us an example or a story of a job seeker, a client that you've worked with, and how you've seen them to civically engage, or their contributions towards development in Central New York or in their community.
Yeah, as I've said before, like this kind of work, it's very impactful in changing the lives of people. We cover Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Oswego, Onondaga County, 5 counties here in Central New York. And we go around recruiting individuals who are seeking for opportunities to find themselves back. And through this process, at least we've been able to partner with Upward Global for now. This is the 3rd year. We're almost closing to the 3rd year. And the success of it all can be seen by the fact that someone comes in and he's recruited to the program. He's able to use the tools and resources that are provided through Upward Global, and it enhances even our capacity to be able to just ensure that whatever focus we have in ensuring this individual is able to be placed through a job comes to fruition. So I'll give two cases in place. We had an individual who came from Afghanistan. He had a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And when he arrived here, somehow based on misconceptions that he had, or even what he had had before about if you have a bachelor's degree, when you come to the United States, you just have to start all over again, simply because sometimes even the hiring managers, they might not have the total understanding of what someone has. And so when I met with this guy, he was a little bit in despair. He wasn't sure whether he's going to really see himself being in that space of civil engineering. But as we continue to work together, because also as a job coach, my responsibility is to provide hope to that individual, knowing that there is possibilities, because without hope, it's so difficult for even one to move. And so that is what this partnership with Upward Global has enabled. In fact, even when I came working to this kind of agency, my question was, who's this person who came up with this kind of idea to help immigrants and refugees? Because it's difficult, even for those who have already had the opportunity to go through education system here in the United States, still they have difficulties to be able to just build that social network and find themselves in jobs that really befits whatever they went to school to study. And so we work with him, and the connection that I made with the executive director. So the good name that we have here at Interfaith Works as a community organization that is well known in the community, I'm able to use that umbrella to reach out to those decision makers. And I talked to the executive director of Builders Exchange. And I told him, hey, here we have a situation of this individual who has a background in engineering, but he's really having a difficult time to break through the job market in this space. And for him, he was very willing to use the CV that we were able to build using the platform that is provided to us by Upward Global, and also all other modules that they are able to train themselves. And at the end of the day, by the time we had met with this individual, he shared his CV with several companies. And before we know it, after 2 days or 3 days, this guy had been called for 3 interviews. And eventually he was able to secure a job as a civil engineer, and he started earning $75,000 per year. And now I'm even meant to understand he's more ambitious, and he's trying to also open his own company so that he can now be his own, to be an entrepreneur in this space and be able to offer his services. The other individual that I'd like to talk about is a gentleman from Syria. He had a background in IT, and he was, by the time he was coming here, also he almost settled for just being a taxi driver, because of lack of understanding of the job market and so forth. But also at the same time, when you meet with people who have already walked the talk, they've already experienced what is happening within the community and what are the possibilities, we are able to confidently present to this person the possibilities. And so good enough, we were able to work with him. And the good thing, people who are educated, they are also open-minded. They come with a lot of humility, understanding that I have to also understand how are things done in this space. And also at the same time, we are also doing our own outreach on the other end, trying to make also hiring managers or employers to realize that we are in this together. These individuals that are here, and if we happen to open opportunities for them to also participate in as a workforce, then it is making things just better for us. So eventually he was able to secure a job as an IT manager. So I can talk about this success stories over and over. I've seen in the field of finance. I've seen someone who had a background in business administration. Most of them going to finding opportunities. And also out of this kind of activity, we are seeing other organizations drawing interest in formulating something that in a sense will be also addressing the needs of immigrants and refugees. So it's a matter of raising awareness. And just like Jeremy attested, that this is the time, this is the moment for us to come out and start proclaiming and saying, hey, if we don't see whatever lies ahead, if we're not going to be proactive in bringing the solution that we want to see in our communities, then at the end of the day, then you might find a situation where even companies might decide to move away. Like a place like here in Syracuse, we had so many companies that decided to go either westward or even southwards. Companies as Korea, the world's largest maker of air conditioner, the General Electric, General Motors, Chrysler, Allied Chemical in Solvay, the Rockwell Tools, Will and Baumer, all these companies used to be here. But the thing is, people got to a point when they moved, there was no opportunity that they saw. So people moved away. But at the same time, now we're seeing like there's a lot of invested interest in Central New York. We're seeing Micron coming in. And now we are also participating in the workforce developmental initiatives. We are able to also find space at the table, you know, to be able to advocate these individuals. So there is meaning, and it's very vital and important. And whatever Upward Global is involved in, I'm lost of words when I think about the efforts that Upward Global is putting out there in just enhancing the well-being of immigrants and refugees.
Thank you, Zachary. That means a lot, and we so appreciate the stories that were so meaningful and motivating that you just shared about those two clients that you've worked with. Thank you for that. I'm going to turn to a couple of questions that we got through the Q&A, and I'm going to start with you, Steve. The question is, would be interested to hear from the speakers what they see as the opportunity to best support our community of immigrants and refugees and frame the narrative as we enter the election cycle. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So by way of background, I come out of the nonprofit community development sector, and I was a politician. I was a state legislator for 6 years, and served in the early 2000s for 4 years with a Republican majority and 2 with a Democratic majority. But it was a time where Democrats weren't sure how they felt about immigration. And in fact, organized labor wasn't sure how it felt about bipartisan compromise on immigration. And during that period of time, I think it's fair to say that I was kind of the chief spokesperson on behalf of immigrants, immigrant rights in the state legislature, advocating for broader driver's licenses, passing consumer protections bills against notarios and immigration clerical fraud, advocating for in-state tuition for dreamers, etc. And I will say that the work I've been doing at Global Detroit, you heard me introduce myself as a part of an economic development organization growing out of a regional chamber of commerce. And so what I have noticed is particularly most of Global Detroit's existence, it has been a Republican governor, a Republican legislature. We happen to have a very pro-immigration Republican governor, but at no point did we have a pro-immigrant Republican legislature. And that these economic frames about how immigration is within the economic self-interest of our communities have been very powerful, and they've been very powerful to defeat attacks on immigrants, and at the same time create opportunities and resources that weren't available. And so I do think that there's a reason, that Map the Impact really .org that Jeremy talked about is an amazing site that anyone can instantly jump on. And I think there are great, in this area, studies on brain waste that hopefully we can put in the chat that have been done by the Migration Policy Institute and others that help quantify the economic costs of immigrants who have college degrees but are not able to fully pursue the professional careers that they're qualified for or desire or trained in because they need a little bit of support in helping to understand and navigate the American workforce system or their licensing and credentialing. And I think those kinds of tools of showing people that this is a win-win opportunity, that this is in the best interest of our communities, and you're seeing, I work with folks, from Oklahoma, from Texas, from states that traditionally on the national political scale have not been friendly to immigrants and have not been welcoming, but recognize their own self-interest. Now, I think it's important. There's always a moral and a fine line. Like it was really powerful in our process at the beginning to have somebody from the Detroit Regional Chamber who, frankly, I don't know his politics, but if I had to guess, I thought he voted Republican, stand up at one of our meetings and sort of said, we can't fake our way to welcoming. We know from a data that college educated, international students, STEM talent, we know that immigrants with those degrees are in much demand. And this was at a time that there was high unemployment in Michigan, but they were saying we need to welcome everybody in order to. And I do think skilled immigrants, international students, others, they get that, right? And that, and in fact, we've done survey research and focus groups more recently. And so as we talk about the economic value, and sometimes that economic value is easiest to quantify in the high skilled positions, it's important that we not malign those who come without education or skills and or from communities that are in developing countries, etc. What we know is that really thanks to the American Immigration Council is that refugees after 20-some years surpass US born workers in terms of their incomes and their wealth, and that for generations, right, Americans have come, and sometimes my grandfather lacked a formal education or English language skills, but within one generation sent two kids to the University of Michigan, and then I think all of his grandchildren have graduate degrees. So there's a fine line here to take, but we do think the economic arguments can be done in a way that brings everybody along and can be quite powerful even in an election year to remind folks.
Thanks for that, Steve. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and I'm going to put it to you, Zachary. With it being Women's History Month this month, how can we center women immigrants in community revitalization?
One thing is that everyone counts, and when we are able to, women are very crucial piece of not just the economic aspect, but also the social and cultural aspect of our society, and them being involved because they bring the compassion with them in this kind of work that we are involved. So revitalization, not just to see them as disposable, like groups of people who maybe they might be set aside to just cater for the needs of children and so forth, but also participate in the economic well-being of our community by being in careers that will really affirm their capacity and abilities to be able to contribute to the economic well-being of our societies. So in itself, we have to realize that there's a lot of burden, especially maybe when a woman has a child at home and they have to decide, should I go to my career or do I have to stay home? So ensuring that those social safety nets are put in place so that they can allow this also the woman to really pursue her career, to pursue her desires, to see herself in also the process itself of making the society better. So this work can only be done when we are all together. We are all together in this, seeing each other with like being empathetic to everyone's situation and scenario, and empowering the voices of women, and urging also women to come forth and also join us in the fight of ensuring that we make this place a welcoming place as possible. I think that's how I would put it.
Thank you so much for that, Zachary, for that response. And I'm looking at our time, and I think we're going to wrap up this panel. I really want to extend our thanks to Steve and Zachary for their time and for sharing their insights and experiences with us. As I said before, we are really grateful to have you as partners to Upwardly Global and for all the efforts and impacts that you and your organizations have in your communities. With that, I'm going to turn to our president and CEO, Gina Kraus-Vilmar. Gina, over to you.
Thank you so much. This was so amazing. Steve, it's always a pleasure to hear you speak. Zachary, it's so lovely to meet you and see the work that we've been doing together. And Jeremy, for bringing us home with all that richness of what that means for us nationally. I think I heard a couple of things that are important. So, one of the questions that Tammy posed in the beginning was, lots of people know Upwardly Global for the direct service we provide. But we know we want to have a greater and deeper impact, and we can only do that if we're investing in local communities with great partners like this. And I think you heard that from Zachary and Steve, which is they have relationships and trust and investment that they've already made in their communities, whether it's with business or government or chambers, and immigrant communities themselves. And so for us, it's really important to realize that we're only going to be able to be part of this village if we're finding partnerships like this with like-minded organizations who really want to lift this community. And so we're super excited about this path that we're setting ourselves towards. I also want to say that one of the things I heard was, the economic argument is out. Like we know we have a talent shortage. We know that's going to be our new normal, with fertility rates, as Jeremy was saying, by 2100, if we stopped immigration today, our population would drop by half. That is an incredible thing to imagine. That is like Endgame in Avengers. And so we know we need immigrants to help us support our economic prosperity, our shared prosperity, but also to revitalize our communities. And so one of the things that we're excited to move beyond as Upwardly Global, the conversation around the economic impact, which is sort of our tried and true model, is, well, what is the ripple effect of that, right? And so we heard Jeremy talk about that. There's a ripple effect in terms of housing. There's a ripple effect in terms of civic engagement. And that's really important to us to start articulating and connecting the dots between those stories, because we don't want people to say immigrants are good for the country as long as they're providing labor. But we want to say immigrants are good for the country because they're revitalizing our culture and our community. And so, Zachary, when you said part of the work that Interfaith does and originated around is how do we create dialogue around culture to bridge these communities? And I think that's going to be fundamentally important when we start to win that economic argument. That next piece is to sort of be able to say, what mechanisms are we creating to ensure that there's cultural inclusion as well, so that those bridges can be built. So I'm just going to say thank you. I want to end this with saying I took a hashtag Jeremy. These are future Americans. We're investing in future Americans. So that's how we should walk away from this. So thank you all for joining us. And thanks to Steve, Zachary, and Jeremy.